Now we may want to look at this in slightly more detail and make use of the facilities of the new version of the calculator. We're going to now go over to the custom livestock, and if I edit the settings here and I use custom data, there's a warning down here that if you select the custom data, the data which is stored in the standard livestock section will be ignored when we generate the report. I'm going to use all gases rather than just CO2. I'm now going to enter a new cattle herd, and we ask for quite a lot more information from the farmer when they enter the data here. First thing to do is enter a name for the herd, whether it is simply cattle or whether you use that name to distinguish between your different animal groups. This is going to be a beef herd, and we have 85 cows, 39 female suckling calves, 39 castrates, 3 service bulls, and 3 females of 1 to 2 years old. Sorry, 8 females of 1 to 2 years old. Notice here, by entering a value here in the yearly head count, it propagates over the months. However, you can clearly adapt this. You can edit these values. If towards the end of the year you sold off some cows and you maybe only had 80 at that stage, all we do is adapt the number, change the number in the box. If the farmer has information on the weight of the animals, the average weights of the animals in each of these groups, then it is much more helpful to put that data in. This data is just provided as a default, which gives some indication of the average animal weight of the groups and of the mature weights for the breed. Again, this will vary by breed, and if the farmer can put in the correct breed weight, that is much better. And we recommend that you do a herd for each breed type. We also have to enter the daily weight gain, and this is where some care has to be taken, because if, for example, you entered a very small daily weight gain here, the cows would not grow from one category in a year to enter into another into the next category. However, the farmers will probably know this value, and therefore it is better if this can be entered here. The calculation within IPC relies on estimating the energy requirement of the animal, and therefore we also need to know, for example, the number of females who are pregnant, numbers lactating, the number of days producing milk. We filled in again default values here, but if, for example, you have young females here who are coming up to first calving, you might well want to delete the lactation and information on the basis that they will not have been feeding calves previously born. Again, we assume that they are 50% out in a restricted area and 50% out in the field. If we hover over the categories in red here, you will get at least some more explanation of what we're looking for. So this category is cattle who are not moving to look for fodder. Clearly a mistake. If you click on that, you go back to the top of the page. So we're saying here that 50% of the time they may be in sheds or they are in confined areas where you're effectively feeding them. They're not having to move to go and find their own food. On pasture, good pasture defined as not having to forage very far to get daily intake, and poor pasture is where they have to spend significant energy going to find their own food. The next set of boxes for most UK herds will just fill out as 0. These, for example, are things like time and high concentration diets, which are relevant to the American feedlot system, where the diet constant is 90% of concentrates. And in very cold climates, which although we think we maybe have cold climates in the UK, generally speaking they're not as cold as in some other parts of the world, and they then want energy requirement for these cattle being outside at temperatures of -10 and -20 for long periods of time. And again, in the UK we tend not to use cattle for work so this category is probably set to 0 as well. Next, two important lines are the digestibility of the feed and the crude protein content of the feed. These given are standard values for herds in the UK. The 74 relates probably more specifically to a dairy herd. It may be that in a beef herd you have a lower digestibility. Again, you can find that information from the feed supplier. When they're inside, we've assumed that all the dung is going to farmyard manure. Again, this is quite easy to change if that's not the case. We delete that and we might, for example, have a flushing lagoon, and the female cows and calves dung there may be going to that. And we can alter this, and this is one way of farmer deciding which of these options is more appropriate to them if they wish to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. The last entry we have is the nitrogen content of the bedding used, and in the UK we assume a higher value for dairy cattle than for beef. For beef cattle, generally speaking, 4 kilograms of nitrogen So for the nitrogen content of bedding, we generally have 4 kilograms per animal per year for beef herds. We store the herd information again and go back to the control panel. I'm now going to enter a sheep flock. Enter the boring name sheep. And here we've got 150 breeding ewes, 105 ewe lambs, 4 breeding rams, and 105 castrates. Again, as you see, this fills up down the column, so if you want to change the monthly entry values, that's fine.